Zoe, if you guys want to get started, I will help Rob get in.
All right, that sounds good to us. So hi everyone. Just really glad to, be here today. I'm not sure that many of you are familiar with Nile. It wouldn't be completely surprising if you weren't. Austin right here, if you want to actually introduce yourself, Austin, he's going to be leading the majority of the discussion. My name is Zoe. I've been working with Nile for about 3 years now. Um, Mostly focused on ramping up our domestic sales, and now I'm focused mostly on our work with service providers. And yeah, Austin, you want to take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Zoe. Hey, folks, great to be here today. My name is Austin Hawthorne. I run the pre-sales solution architect team here at Nile. Been with Nile for a little over 3 years. In a couple slides here, I'll kind of go over the company history a little bit. But been in the network security industry for the better part of 27 years, I think it is now. Mainly on the vendor side of the house. Most recently, I came from Aruba Networks, where I ran the pre-sales system engineering team there. I was there for the better part of 17 years, which was a great fun ride. But now we're here disrupting networking, and looking forward to telling you guys all the cool stuff we got going on here.
Great. And then just for a quick view into what we plan to cover today, we're planning to just do a quick overview of the Nile technology itself, how that sort of fits into your world over at Clearfly. And then we'll give a brief, a little insight into the packages that we have designed specifically for your market and how we expect that process to go from, sharing what the technology is all the way to quoting it. But it'll be pretty high level today. Again, if you have any questions as we go through, you're welcome to jump in and stop us or drop something in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that as well.
Awesome. Hey, Tom, before we kind of jump into this, anything else you want to kind of preface this with, or just get going?
No, I mean, you guys can go ahead and get going. I can tell you, everybody that's on the call, that we're using Nile's infrastructure within our own office in Billings
Awesome.
and have been, I don't know, it must be probably 4 to 6 months now. Works like a charm, makes my life easy. So Ken actually implemented it. Ken Mix, for those of you that know him, he's our network engineer, and went through the process. It was super simple to set up, and like I said, everything's working fantastic in our office and has been for a while. We've also had quite a few dealers take a look at it and provide some feedback to both Clearfly and Nile. Everything from a technical analysis to a pricing analysis, and that's how we ended up here. So
Awesome. Well, listen, I couldn't ask for a better way to open this up, so I appreciate it.
my pleasure.
Sure. So let's jump in. And I think per Zoe's agenda, want to give you a little bit of background of the company, where we started, why we were founded, what problems we set out to solve, dig in a little bit to the technology that we've built, and then talk about the outcomes that it's really driving for our customers. I'll probably sprinkle in some anecdotes about some of our customers, what they're doing, why they went Nile, etc. But nothing better than that endorsement we just got from Tom. And as we mentioned, anybody have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and we can dig into it. Any question you guys have. But just to start this off with this slide here, the company's been around for about 7 years now. We are a startup. We've been delivering our service. We don't like to call it a product, but we'll kind of get into what that actually means here in a minute. But we've been delivering our service for a little over 3 years now. I actually joined the company when we got done with building the MVP service and doing a little bit of the friends and family discount to making sure it works and get a couple of initial logos. And I was part of the initial team to come on board to bring this solution to market. We have over 200 customers at right now. When we get to the next slide, we'll do our little trophy slide and kind of show you what that looks like. But the original inception, the original idea was from some of these people that you see on the screen, and some of these names might look really familiar. Guys like John Chambers, who made Cisco what Cisco is, and his right man hand while he was at Cisco, Pankaj Patel. John's on our board. He's the chairman of the board, and Pankaj Patel is our CEO. These guys, along with Suresh Kadakam, who's our visionary leader, and our chief development officer, Sri, they basically have been in networking, building networking solutions with a number of different vendors to bring to market for 30 plus years. Pankaj talks about how he's been doing this for 40 plus years, which is crazy to me, but he's been in the industry a long time. And one of the key problem statements that they saw that led to the inception of this company is that networking fundamentally hasn't changed in the 30, 40 years that a lot of us have been doing it. A lot of the guys that you see on the screen have been doing it. But yet, other areas of the technology stack have fundamentally moved way past the where networking is. And what I mean by that is you look at what's happened with storage and compute. You look at what's happened with applications, how they've moved to the cloud, how they basically have become technologies that customers can consume instead of buy, build, and operate, which allows them to free up budgets, free up resources, and be able to have technology that's always ready to meet their business needs at the pace of their business. That's essentially what's happened with this cloud shift over the last 15 years, and why IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS has become a dominant model for customers to consume storage, compute, and applications. But you look at other areas of technology stack like networking, it fundamentally hasn't changed. Some pieces of it, have been cloudified, like network management and some solutions, but still customers have to go buy, build, and operate these networks. And the majority of those customers, maybe except for the top 1% that have, the biggest budgets and the biggest, amount of resources and expertise, they're not able to extract the value out of networking, and their businesses suffer. Right? They're not able to afford what they need. They're not able to keep up with the security threats and the use cases. They're not able to keep up with all the issues and the productivity hits because of lack of funding, because of lack of resources, because of lack of expertise. Fundamentally, networking has become too costly and too complex for businesses to consume anymore, and something's got to give. So these guys that basically made the networking business, back in the Cisco days to what it is today, they said, who better than us to disrupt this? Who better than us to start from the ground up and build a new model to deliver cloud native networking solution to our customers that gets free of the costs, it frees it up at the complexity, frees it up all the issues, and allows customers to consume networking that's always up to date, optimized, tuned, secured, etc. And it's always ready to meet their business needs at the pace of their business. That was the initial idea. We started off 7 years ago, gone through 3 rounds of funding. You can kind of see the funding numbers on here. We've grown to an organization that has over 220 people. And as I stated, and Zoe, if you want to go to the next slide, we've grown quite a list of great customers over these past 3 years. If you guys are familiar with startups, startups typically start real small, right? You start with customers that definitely don't have the budgets, definitely don't have the resources. They have a lot of pain that matches to our value, and we kind of start there to build out the credibility, build out the trust, build out the market share and the thought leadership, as well as figure out the business model and fine tune that whole product market fit and everything else. That's where we started 3 years ago, and as we've gone on, we've now have Fortune 100, Fortune 50 customers like Schneider Electric. We've got big universities like Stanford universities. We've got household names like Pitney Bowes and Dollar Tree. And the list keeps on growing. We're in, I live in New York City, and we're in, a number of big financials that I'm sure you guys can guess the name inside their labs, because they're now looking for this type of model because of the same problem statements that we talk about. So we have proven this out, which is the main point of this slide, and we do have the experience to be able to deliver even on the largest, most complex type of environments. Next slide, Zoe. Now, ultimately, what are our customers looking for? And since I think a big focus of this you guys is the SMB space, I think the problem statements are relatively the same, just on different scale as to what a lot of our other customers are looking for. Ultimately, if we think about the first part of this slide, security, customers are challenged with security. You think about retail, quick serve restaurants, with their PCI requirements. You think about small, clinic branches or urgent care shops that have HIPAA requirements. You think about the pace of threats that are going on in the industry today. The poster child of complexity for networking, in my opinion, is trying to secure it, trying to identify who's connecting, what's connecting, trying to authorize everything, trying to segment everything, trying to police everything, to try to prevent as much as possible, and to try to limit the exposure from a compromise, so the blast radius is low. This is complex beyond belief. Most customers just aren't able to actually get this done in the right way, and they have to make up for it with cyber insurance, and those premiums are really high because ultimately they know they're going to get popped sooner or later. So those premiums go high because they're just not able to secure or lock down that network the way they need to. That's number one. And we're going to talk about how we built in security so customers can actually consume zero trust levels of security, as opposed to today's model where you have to build and bolt it multiple solutions on top of it, networking to get that done. That's number one. And that has a cost benefit to it, that has lower complexity benefit to it, and it has lower risk benefit to it. The next big pillar is every organization that we're talking to has an AI and or automation initiative. But this dirty little secret, and by the way, they're doing that because they want to lower costs. This stuff has become too complex for human consumption. The business is moving too fast. The challenges and the use cases are moving too fast. So let's throw AI and automation, which has the promise of making those organizations more efficient and more agile and keeping up with those changes and those threats. The problem is those are yet another bolt-on solution that somebody has to go buy, which means they have to be able to afford it. And they have to have the expertise on staff or through partners to be able to figure out how to set it up and constantly tune it to make sure that it's always delivering on the goal of, most organizations have a goal of trying to automate at least 50% of the manual tasks that they're doing today. And if you look at, I think it was in either Gartner study or IBM study, they basically say that, most organizations, I think 70% of organizations fail to meet that goal of automating 50% of their manual tasks that they have today because of that cost and complexity. The last bullet, and we'll talk about how we have AI automation built in with zero configuration, and we are the ones that are maintaining that optimization and tuning and everything else to be able to deliver guaranteed performance-based outcomes to our customers, and that requires much less touch than any kind of existing network technology today. And that kind of leads into the last one, avoiding unnecessary cost and operational burden. There are just too tickets, too many changes, too many configs, too many patches, too many vulnerabilities, too much compliance, too many audits, etc., that it is a big burden on operations today. If you think about the day zero through day end type of life cycle of a technology, and here we're here talking about networking, after you get something stood up and you hand it off to day two, day end, then it's somebody else's problems, it's operations problem to try to deal with all of these user issues, all these device issues, all these changes, all these patches, all these optimizations, tuning, and it's just overwhelming to a lot of these operational organizations because of the same complexities that we talked about. If we can reduce the operational burden and deliver a network that is financially backed with guaranteed performance-based outcomes, right, and allows those organizations to free up their budgets and their resources to go focus on the things that matter, and instead look at networking purely as a utility, it just works. That's the type of outcome we're trying to deliver to our customers. Next slide, Zoe. So I'm not going to spend too much time on here. We'll send these slides out. But ultimately, there's different value statements that we have for different key stakeholders within the organization. For the business leaders, it's about reappropriating cost and budgets and resources to the things that matter. Getting out of the owning equipment and all the capex spend and move to a pure consumption model. That has a big financial benefit to a lot of business leaders. To IT leaders, we talked a little bit on the last slide about significantly lowering the overall total cost of ownership of all the manual things that they're doing today. And if they could free up their budgets and their resources to go focus on other things, what other net benefit could that have to these organizations? You can see here about networking. I'll skip past that for a minute. That should be relatively straightforward. IT security, again, poster child of complexity on a network stack today, I think, is trying to secure that network stack. And if I can come to our customers and say, listen, this architecture eliminates up to 13 to 15 different areas of the traditional attack surface of a traditional network and can truly eliminate lateral movement by default, which means if a compromise comes in, that compromised host is ultimately going to be limited to a blast radius of 1 because of the type of segmentation that we built into our architecture. This is a huge benefit to customers. They can reduce their risk, reduce their spend across their entire security portfolio. So there's a big value prop there. And we talked a little bit about IT operations. Now let's talk a little bit about how we do this. We've kind of teed this up a little bit about why we exist, who we are, what the problems we're trying to solve. Let's talk a little bit more about how we're actually approaching this. Next slide, Zoe. So guys, a lot of what I've been touching on so far is today's networking. Like I mentioned, I've been in the industry for 27 years. I started out as a CCIE, learned Cisco, learned CLI, learned Web UI, learned all the different protocols, how to stitch all this stuff together. But networking today is much different than it was 25, 27 years ago. There's a lot of new challenges from a security perspective, a lot of new use cases, a lot of new scaling, a lot of new protocols, a lot of new architectures that have to be, the job of me as a network engineer is try to figure out how to stitch all of this together, even if it's from the same vendor, and try to make it work for my environment in an operationally simplistic sort of way and in a secure way. This is no easy task. And without getting into all this for the network engineers or the network minded type folks that are on the call, this should be pretty self-explanatory. When I worked at Aruba, we started out as just a WLAN company, but when I left 17 years later, we had so many different products with so many different silos, for product management and engineering, that even the same products from the same vendor, it was my team's job to figure out how to make it work. It was my partner's job to try to figure out how to make it work. It was our customer's job to try to figure out how to make it work because they were built in isolation, right? And I can wrap AI and automation around it, but it's still more complexity. I've got to figure out, okay, this patch version for this type of system and this patch version for this system, this one has this type of log format, this one has this type of log format. How do I normalize that and feed it into a data lake? And how do I identify problems and constantly tune this thing? And if one person changes one thing under the covers, all of a sudden the house of cards comes falling apart. And when we try to, visualize the complexities that our customers have to deal with, it's embodied by this picture, but the only other alternative that our customers have had in the last 30 years was to try to just move this complexity to somewhere else. And that somewhere else was outsourcing or managed services. And I feel for a lot of, traditional managed service providers because they had to deal with all this complexity. The complexity doesn't go away. The managed service providers were basically masters at trying to hide the complexity from the customers and turn around a somewhat agile network, which, that's somewhat problem free and is somewhat secure to be able to try to meet the customer's use cases. But the complexity still existed. It's just they had to throw a lot of cost and tooling and people and expertise at it to try to solve that problem because the customer didn't have it. So we're trying to solve this burden from both angles. If a customer's dealing with this themselves and they don't have the expertise or the budgets to deal with today's complexity, great, we've got a solution for them. For MSPs that are having a hard time, addressing customer demands, concerns, needs, et cetera, in a cost-effective way because of their own cost associated with this complexity, great, we've got a great solution for those managed service providers as well. If you go to the next slide, Zoe. The way we've approached this is we purposely didn't take traditional, some white box solutions off the shelf with a traditional network operating system. Take this AP vendor, take this access switch vendor, this distribution switch vendor, this gateway, this sensor, this network management, or whatever, and try to stitch it all together. That would have never solved this problem because that's the same way everybody else has been trying to approach it. The traditional complexity still exists. Somebody still has to configure it, somebody still has to monitor it, somebody still has to troubleshoot it, somebody still needs to secure it, somebody still needs to update it. We took a totally different approach. And if you listen to our co-founder, Suresh Kadakam, he's got a great talk track about the original mindset that went into building our model. He's like, listen, all of the other vendors for the last 30 plus years have basically taken the approach of building product that, the network, the developers that work at these organizations, engineers, build product with features, capabilities, and protocols, and they build an interface that allows some network engineers, some network operators, some security engineers to do something with it. They build code with the mindset that it's somebody else's problem to go configure it, go tune it, go secure it, go optimize it, go monitor it, etc. That's not their job. They built a product with protocols and capabilities and interface. They sell it to a customer or partner, and it's somebody else's problem to stitch it all together. We took a dramatically different approach. We basically started and said, what if there's nobody on the other side of this? What if there's nobody on the other side of that interface, the other side of that log, the other side of that CLI, the other side of that event? Let's build a platform that assumes that there is nobody to configure this stuff, that there is nobody to monitor their stuff, that there is nobody to update this stuff, that there is nobody to secure this stuff. And instead, let's take this shift left concept of incorporating all of that into the actual network operating system itself. And instead, let's deliver this as a service where we in our software and our people are constantly optimizing, tuning, securing, updating, scaling, etc., all of our customer environments. That was key tenet number one that we approached this with. Key tenet number two was, excuse me, is we have to take this, we have to build networks that get rid of a lot of the snowflakes that, or the variables that cause snowflake environment to exist. If you think about all of our customer environments that I'm sure you guys are dealing with, that I've dealt with for a long time, almost every single one is a different snowflake. It's a different hardware mix, software mix, config mix, protocol mix, architecture mix, etc. And trying to deal with those snowflakes with AI software, automation software, etc., is near impossible. It's the main reason that Gartner or IBM, I forget which one I'm quoting here, states that 70% of those automation initiatives fail. But if I can actually deliver a deterministic network to my customers that is free of a lot of the problems that plague common networks, like configuration. One of the things we said is, what if we could just get rid of config? There is nobody to config. Let's let the architecture bring itself up, with the right type of segmentation, with the right type of routing, with the right type of discovery, with the right type of resiliency, etc. Nobody should have to configure it. This stuff should be able to figure itself out and be able to bring itself up inside the environment with zero config. That means there's zero complexity that somebody has to deal with from a config perspective. There's zero mistakes that happen because of config, and there's zero security vulnerabilities that exist because somebody can attack that config and bypass the security control. We just got rid of it. There's no console port. So we took that mindset to building this out as well. It's like, let's first start with eliminating as many problems as we can. They just shouldn't exist in our stack. And then where we couldn't eliminate, now we have a deterministic network that has the same hardware mix, same software mix, same architecture, etc. Now we have a deterministic environment across all of our environments that we can actually now update, tune, optimize, etc. at scale and at pace of all of our businesses that are actually running our networks. We don't have to deal with snowflakes anymore. Right? This allows us to ultimately deliver that guaranteed performance-based outcome that I alluded to a couple times throughout the presentation. And so you want to go to the next slide? So this is ultimately what we're delivering to our customers. We built our own hardware, our own access switches, APs, distribution switches, and sensors that run our cloud native network operating system and are deployed in a hybrid cloud type of model. It's the hardware that's obviously on-prem at our customer site. They get deployed with just a QR code scan of every network element. There is no per network element config that's necessary at all. There's just a little app that I'll show you here in a minute that brings it up, and then architecture brings itself up. It automatically, activates itself against the customer tenant, creates a digital twin in the back end, and our automation software starts feeding telemetry from all the instrumentation that we built into this stuff. And now it's run as a vertically integrated stack between the cloud and this on-prem equipment to be able to deliver those predictable, those guaranteed-based outcomes that we deliver to our customers. So that's a key point that I want to point out. This is our hardware that we purpose-built with our OS, with our instrumentation that feeds our telemetry that allows us to do the AI and automation that we need to be able to deliver those guaranteed-based outcomes to our customers, right? And we've automated a lot of manual tasks from day 0 to day N, so we've gotten rid of a lot of the complexity. The second big point that I want to make is, and I touched on it a little bit, is we built in zero trust levels of security inside of the stack. Our customers shouldn't have to bolt on security. They should have a network that is inherently secure with zero trust levels of security built in. And I don't have a dedicated slide on this, but I'll give you the 3 pillars from a zero trust perspective that we built this stack. Number 1 is encrypt everything end to end. By default, all the intermediate links between all of our network elements have MACsec enabled by default. The software figures out how to mutually do authentication with our certificates on TPMs, automatically negotiate keys, multiple keys, automatically figure out how to do hitless key rotation. Nobody configures that. The network stack brings itself up, which means there's no threat of a man-in-the-middle IP snooping, IP packet injection anywhere inside the network stack. That's zero trust principle number 1. Zero trust principle number 2 is no unauthorized connections. The days of wide open network ports has to go away. It has to go away. And the reason there's still a lot of wide open network ports at a lot of our customers is because the complexities of trying to lock them down. One of my startups that I was with, was a cybersecurity step, and I had to deal a lot with customers that were running red teams and blue teams, and I learned a lot, in that experience where about the tactics that red teams take. You think about SMBs. Let's focus on maybe retail for a second. There were red teams that would show up at a retail customer dressed in an AT&T uniform with a clipboard and a piece of paper saying they've got a work order to do some work in the IT closet, asking the people that were working the store to show them to the IT closet. And of course, those people showed them to the IT closet. And of course, they got into that IT closet and they were able to plug into a port that had no authentication, no security controls on it at all. They're done. Their job is done. They're in, right? That fundamentally has to go away. So we built a stack that fundamentally does not allow any unauthorized connections, wired or wireless at all. Every connection has to be authorized via a variety of different mechanisms, and we could talk about that in depth, how we integrate into customer systems, how we have our own capabilities, etc. But the point is that everything has to be authorized. The third zero trust principle was authorize every request. Even though a device is connected and authenticated, every request for every resource should be authorized. From a network perspective, that essentially equates to every flow. So what if we take segmentation one step further than it's traditionally been? Instead of using VLANs or private VLANs or security group tags or VXLAN or dynamic ACLs and whatever, what if we go one step further and just isolate by default every host from every other host, just in the architecture, and forward that up to an upstream firewall? So that firewall now has visibility into what was the blind spot in the traditional network, and it now has the capability to authorize every flow coming from every device. Lateral movement that happens at the VLAN level in today's networking fundamentally goes away. And again, nobody has to configure this. This just happens by default. Zoe, next slide. The one piece I want to kind of start to kind of close up the technology piece here is talking a little bit about how we built this from a co-managed or a shared responsibility model. Everything that I've kind of been alluding to as it relates to telemetry and instrumentation and automation and the digital twin, that all happens in our behind-the-scenes software that we call Nile Autopilot. This is part of our vertically integrated stack that is vertically integrated all the way to the network devices that are deployed at the customer premise. This is where we start the automation from day zero to day N, and we have a digital twin of every single one of our customer environments. It's collecting telemetry from every single one of the network elements, and it's running automation based on AI and analytics-based insights that we're collecting from all of this telemetry. That's our software. Customers don't need to worry about it. They don't need to deploy anything like that. We're taking care of all of that, and that's what's at the heart of delivering that guaranteed performance-based outcome. Now, while our job is to make sure that the network infrastructure itself is problem-free, right? It's our service, it's our hardware, there is no upfront CapEx, it's pure OpEx. We own that infrastructure, and our job is to deliver an infrastructure that's stable, secure, and provides guaranteed performance-based outcomes to our customers. That said, it is our customers' network or the partners that are running it for them. So it is very much co-managed, where it's our job to take care of the infrastructure, but then it's the customer and or partner job to do something with the infrastructure. Every customer's requirements are unique as it relates to SSIDs or integrations or what have you. So that's where we provide Nile Copilot as the IT interface and the user interface into the Nile service. Customers go into the IT admins, whether customer or partners, go into Nile Copilot and basically set the context of what they want that network infrastructure to do. What SSIDs, what segmentation, what integration into alerting systems, ticketing systems, SIMs, what have you. All of that's there. All of the information that a customer needs or a partner needs to be able to troubleshoot the user's devices and applications that are connecting to and through the network is all there. No other systems are necessary to be able to do that. So it's essentially all the control and the visibility that our customers want without any of the burden or cost. And then the last piece is the Nile Nav app. This is the installer app. This is something that our installers get, whether it's customers or partners. And this is something that walks them through data gathering or survey, feeds that survey data into our data lake so we can run an automated design against it, which creates the digital twin. And it's also where the work orders will be, so that when the equipment shows up on site, the installer just has to walk through these work orders, QR code scan each and every network element, it activates it, and they're off and running, and it's done. That's it. Next slide, Zoe. So to start to summarize a little bit of why this matters, and I've thrown a lot at you guys. I don't know if there was any questions. Apologize, I'm getting blinded by the light here. But let's go through a couple of key value statements real quick. One, and I kind of just touched on this, there is no upfront cost. I fundamentally believe that a lot of networks are handicapped right from the get-go because customers can't afford everything that they want. They got to fit, what they want into a budget envelope, which means they're probably making trade-offs and compromise somewhere along the way. And that compromise hopefully doesn't have a business impact, but in many cases it probably does have a business impact. So we wanted to get rid of that, right? It's pure OpEx. There is no upfront cost for our service. It is just pure OpEx based service that we charge either in a per user or per square foot model, and we can get more into that. It is enterprise grade hardware. This isn't cheap stuff that we pulled off the shelf. We built this to deliver enterprise grade level capabilities to all of our customers. One of those trade-offs and compromises that come from trying to fit something into a budget envelope is, hey, I can't afford the best of the best. I can only afford this mediocre or the lowest common denominator piece of hardware. Let's just get rid of that. Part of building a deterministic network and getting rid of the snowflakes is just deploying the same high-level equipment everywhere with the same high-level set of capabilities. That has better operational savings day two, and that gives me a better chance of delivering, guaranteed based outcomes to all of our customers. There is no SmartNet, no licensing cost, no maintenance cost, no support contracts. It's our hardware, which, by the way, that means if we determine that our hardware goes end of life, it's our job to make sure that we replace that hardware. If a customer is still subscribed to our service and we can't deliver guaranteed performance outcomes because we end of life something, customers shouldn't have to foot the bill for that. That's our job, as long as they're paying for the service, to go replace that hardware. So they're out of the end of life game. I mentioned before there was a lot of optimization or automation done day zero, day one, and I mentioned the Nav app on the last slide. There's a lot of cost savings, and we can go over a full TCO that happen by getting rid of all of the creation of the design, optimizing the survey, getting rid of the day one config, etc. A lot of that is automated, which means there's a lot of savings on that front. We've touched on security quite a bit, so I'll kind of skip over that one. But then, the last piece is really, simplifying, the day two, day end type of operations, getting rid of, trouble tickets. I have a slide, but I don't have it here, where, there's a large number of customers that we've deployed that we have fundamentally eliminated 100% of the network infrastructure related tickets inside of their environments. Think about the cost and productivity savings of that. Outside of that, we don't control everything, obviously. There's other things that could happen that people will blame on networking, but we built a level of proactive visibility into this that constantly monitors these other things like network services, like DHCP and DNS, like the connectivity, like the applications themselves, because if an application like Facebook goes down, people are going to blame it on the network, right? Because there's a new logo above their head. What if we were providing visibility into all of that and providing that to the IT teams, either at our customers or our partners, to let them know, instead of waiting for a user to complain, that something is going on and that they should focus their time and attention where the problem is to solve it. That level of proactive visibility has dramatically reduced the mean time to detection and mean time to resolution for other issues outside of our control that is commonly blamed on a network. Zoe, next slide. And this, folks, kind of sums it up. I'm going to take a breath and stop talking and probably get this light out of my face in a second. But what this has the promise to bring to everybody on this call, huge opportunity for sales acceleration. Instead of having to come up with bill of materials, fit something in a budget envelope, et cetera, that you guys, I'm sure, know full and well, we just put all of that into a square footage or a per user number. Now, there is professional services that need to be added on top of that. That's a much lower cost than traditional networking because of the automation that we do. But as far as the Nile service and all the hardware we include in that, in the services we do, it's just a per square foot or per user number. We could actually turn around a budgetary quote for a customer that I would say is probably 85 to 90% accurate, literally within 24 hours. The other part of this is faster deployments. Right, being able to get a customer up and running within hours in some cases is because of our model to just do a QR code scan, get this stuff hooked up, and don't have to worry about all this integration into network monitoring systems and patching and tuning and securing and optimizing. Customers are amazed when they see how quickly this comes up and comparing it to the traditional. And the last piece is easier expansion. We manage the network. We manage the refresh. We manage capacity planning. I mentioned the end of life thing, et cetera. So customers want to expand into new sites, new floors, new buildings, new countries, et cetera. It is relatively straightforward and easy because it all goes against the same tenant. We just got to do a couple things to quote that out and do a quick survey, and we're done. Niraj, I see you kind of came off of onto camera there. I'm kind of done. I wanted to kind of pull there, see if there's any questions, but Niraj or Zoe, you want to add any color to any of that?
Let's wait for some questions, then we can add some commentary.
I think I can add a little bit of commentary on the translation to a float piece.
Oh, there you
I
go.
did want to add some clarity, Austin. I know that Austin had mentioned that we can do some price based on square footage. So for your team specifically, we realized that, with smaller size deployments, you probably want a little bit more of a clear idea of what this cost could look like based on just your existing customer base. What we did is we created these kitted packages that you'll eventually be able to see in the ClearConnection portal that break down, up to 25 users all the way up to 150 users in kitted packages. So you'd know, okay, I'm going to get one access point and one switch for any site that's up to 2,500 square feet. And what I'll do after this is I'll make sure that you all have a copy of this deck so that you have a chance to review in a little bit more detail. But yeah, this was just a sort of call out on Austin's point about quoting. That said, what questions do we have so far? Anybody? Thoughts, feedback? All right. So one thing that I did want to share is next steps. So Rob and I were having a few conversations, and we'd had some conversations within the Nile team of, what's necessary to make sure that you all are prepared to go out and sell Nile, go out and deliver Nile, and make sure that your customers are having the best experience possible. To do that, we created, so Nile has a platform called Nile Badging through this program called Percipio. What that enables you to do is go through, and it's about a 3.5-hour training program, and it will give you very high-level information about the Nile solution, and overview a lot of the things that are necessary to deploy it. So this covers very specifically, it's an overview of the technology, how to migrate the solution, how you would perform the sort of site discovery, what the network cabling plan looks like that we've spit out to you, and then a little bit more information about rack stack and installation. What we decided is that before we are going to have any of you listed on the ClearConnection portal, we'd want you all to go through this Nile Academy training. Like I said, that's going to be about 3.5 hours. You'd register right at this link right here. Go through the Nile Trailblazer journey, which covers those pieces that I mentioned in the previous slide. And then whenever you finish that certificate, if you could just send an email to Rob and I, and we'd make sure that you're listed within the ClearConnection portal.
Hey, Zoe, Harry has his hand up. Harry, you have a question.
Harry.
Yeah, this may tie in with what Zoe was covering, but I think you touched on it earlier, but the professional services end from the vendor's point of view, and my questions are like AP placement or the Nile device placement, and has to be, usually, previously it's been done with some kind of floor plans or building materials, other stuff. Different companies do different things.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Is there a model for us? And in the badging process, maybe you go through this, where we can estimate.
Austin, you want to cover the Nile nav at a high level?
Yeah, I'm happy to cover that. So just a traditional environment, there is a predictive survey that does need to be done. That's either via Ekahau or Hamina. Part of our standard model to deliver that guaranteed performance, we have 2 tiers, by the way, just a real high level. One is essentials, which is pretty much a 1-for-1 replacement for whatever the customer has or whatever you guys deem appropriate to do. But the other model is advanced, where we control the design, which we need to be able to then deliver that guarantee-based outcome. So with that advanced design, we have a set of requirements for that predictive survey. Once a customer signs up to the portal, the first step is they put in their site address and they upload floor plan or floor plans. That gets pulled into our automation software and assigned to somebody based on the project. It could be a customer, it could be a partner, it could be an internal Nile employee. It gets assigned to somebody to do a predictive. They per our standard, they upload that back up into our automation software, and then that feeds the automated high level design, low level design, and resulting bill of materials that gets spit out. Basically, a pretty document with all the AP placements and cabling connections and everything else gets sent to whoever's going to be the installer, as well as work orders get created inside of that nav app that I talked about before. When the installer shows up on site, they have a self-guided set of steps through that nav app that tells them to unpack this AP, scan it, and put it into this location on this map. All of that, and it's in that app itself, all of that started with that initial predictive plan.
Harry, does
Okay,
that answer
great.
your question?
Yeah, that helps a lot. Yeah, I knew there had to be some kind of process like that, but that's great. Thanks.
And for the rest of you as well, a lot of this, actually all of this will be covered in badging training as well. So yes, everything that Austin said, it'll sort of give you a quick overview and a full outline of when you'd expect to be receiving those cabling plans based on next step in the process. What other questions do we have so far?
I mean, you got a glimpse of the pricing. Let me throw a question at you. Based on your experience and what you do, where do you think we stack up? You want to go back to that page, Zoe? Thank you. And mind you, this price per month includes all license, hardware, everything, right? So there is no CapEx upfront. It's just pure OpEx.
Are all of the switch ports accessible on that 48 port switch?
Yes. Apart from the ones we need for the AP, the answer is yes.
So I have a question then. So with this pricing here, you're including all the network hardware, the firewall and the switch and the AP or whatever.
No firewall, no.
Okay,
Just
that's
the
where.
switch, just the switch and the AP, and the
Okay,
accessories that go to install it.
so the
So
customer
think
still
about it,
needs to
David, to
provide a
answer that.
firewall.
Sorry, David. So to answer your question, you get your internet connectivity that either terminates on a router or a firewall. We sit behind that. So the equipment behind it, so the switch and the APs is what we provide.
Okay,
In
And
addition
we
to our
interface with any firewall that you have. So whether it's Sophos, Palo Alto, Zscaler, doesn't matter. We integrate with all of them. Sorry, Zoe, you were saying something.
Oh, I was just going to add so you get the switches APs in addition to the cloud native operating portal, access to the Nile navigation app, and then all of the autopilot features that Austin had discussed are all sort of built into the software itself.
okay.
So this is Harry again. Those prices that are listed are kind of like the ClearConnection and other Clearfly products. Those are our base prices. We can then put those out in quotes of sky's the limit, so to speak.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Charles, you have your hand raised.
Yes, question. So the navigation portal, do you specifically have one for the partners so they can see what is occurring on the network on an ongoing basis? And is there a
Yes.
separate one for the end user, or are they the same portals?
We have a
It's the same portal, different access. Sorry, Austin,
Okay.
go ahead and answer that question.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
just-
and the main reason for that question is there analytics that can be showed to the customer from a layman's term as to what they're paying monthly and really what they're getting as far as security is concerned? So how many attacks have been, thwarted by the security on the Nile side? So it sort of justifies that in their budget on a month-to-month basis, because we all know that the SMB space, the budgets are a lot tighter.
Austin?
Yeah, was that Charles asking a question? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Hey, Charles. Yeah. So we have a summary, an executive summary dashboard that goes over, a number of different key data points that, our customers are interested in. But as far as like the specific example that you brought up about the number of security threats or incidents that we've thwarted, I want to be a little bit clear. So, we force the authorization of every connection to our system, but that's typically being authorized via SSO or 802.1x via Radius or some other mechanisms. As well as we're pushing by default all traffic up to the firewall, so the firewall can see and do more than it can in a traditional network. So we're providing the architecture that
Okay,
essentially is more secure to then enable those other security tools to do more. So those types of insights would actually come from those other security tools.
understood.
Yep.
That answered the question. Thank you very much.
All right, what other questions do we have?
Look, as you digest this information, Zoe is going to send you the deck. Feel free to reach out to us, to Zoe, to me, if you have an opportunity, how you want to think about it, while you're still going through your badging process, talk to us. More than happy to answer your questions and help you with your sales process. I mean, if you need, you do it once, your life becomes so simple. You probably won't need our help again in terms of pitching it to the customer and selling it.
And I would encourage you all to go in and do the badging before you essentially have a potential account, because you don't want to go through that process and be stalled to go through the badging before you can even quote it. So try and go in early.
And one thing to mention as well, when I send out this deck, after what I had presented today, which ends at slide 16 there, I did include quite a bit more information for you all just to peruse. So that includes, a little bit more information about the packages, very high level look at what the installation might look like, and then, some sellers battle cards and extra information down here. But that should give, some initial overview, but any specific questions, I mean, I'll always be happy to help. So will Austin and Yurich. All right.
Just a quick note, at the end of the presentation, you will receive an email with the survey link. And I actually believe if you stick around afterwards, that survey will pop up. Really encourage all of you to just go through it. It's very quick. What was it, Zoe? 3, 4 questions? 2, 3 questions. Yeah. So if you could just take a quick moment of your time to do that survey, that will help not only Nile, but it'll also help Clearfly. So we would appreciate you doing that. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, Neeraj,
Oh, no,
Zoe.
Keith had his hand up.
Oh,
Oh, he just dropped.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't understand how the button works. Evidently it doesn't stay on. So the question I have is, you said you integrate with multiple firewalls, so Palo Alto, whoever, then are you going through that out to your services, or are you manipulating the config in that particular device? What is the purpose of the firewall on site besides DHCP?
Yeah, so the firewall on site, Keith, we're not doing anything with that. Just so you know, the uplinks from what we call our Nile service block, our network equipment to those firewalls is just a native routed link. There's no special tagging, no special protocols, no nothing. It's just a regular routed link. But we're essentially forcing all traffic up to that firewall. Whatever security controls the customer wants to do, as it relates to the capabilities of that firewall, any kind of policing, any kind of UTM detection capabilities, whatever, they would configure on that firewall, or you guys would configure on that firewall. Our connection, the traffic flow, the actual data packets don't go up to our cloud. They go up to that firewall, and the firewall routes them wherever the firewall is going to route them. The metadata, the telemetry of what's going on in that network does go up to our cloud via gRPC connection. So that firewall does need to allow that through from our network elements up to our cloud, but that's it.
Okay, is it almost along the lines of like a DNS server on site that would route the traffic differently? And I'm not strong in IT, so just enough to do damage.
No, no worries. I mean, traditionally, the firewall is going to do a couple things. The firewall is going to, implement some either basic policies like, hey, don't allow anything from the internet into the customer network, right?
Yep.
Only allow outbound connections. They might, if the customer has some services, they might statically configure some holes in that firewall to let some inbound services in. They might leverage some UTM, which stands for Universal Threat Management, capabilities of some next generation firewalls to detect malware or malicious behavior that might be going on inside of that network, to be able to try to detect a compromise and get it out of the network quickly before it becomes a breach. Firewalls are capable of doing all that. They might use a firewall to set up site-to-site VPNs to be able to route traffic between sites or between a site and a data center instead of going straight out to the internet. All of that are capabilities of the firewall and going to be custom configured based on the customer needs.
Okay, so your primary is just to eliminate the upfront cost of setting up a network. So it's just the hardware primarily.
Not just the upfront cost, but the day two operation cost is the big part of this. All the patching, the tuning, the optimizing, the troubleshooting, the issues, et cetera. Fundamentally, we eliminate all of that from a network infrastructure perspective.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Charles, looks like you have a question.
Yes. So let's say we have partners that would like to farm that security portion off. Do you offer network firewall options, or if they wanted to partner with a network firewall provider, would the solution function differently or require something different?
Narash, you want to cover that one?
So we do have a firewall as a service that we can offer. Typically, we don't, but if you need it, we can. Or, like I said, you bring in any firewall and we'll integrate with it. Of course, then, as part of the setup, you'll have to do some integration and all that. But, which you have to do with any other vendor anyway.
Yeah, and the question was more along the lines for the partners that don't want to handle the security portion with an on-prem firewall, having that option to farm it off if it's within the budget for the customer. So,
yeah.
Okay.
And Charles, by the way, we mentioned firewall a number of times. For smaller sites, it doesn't need to be a firewall. It could be a little, router. It can be a little
Correct.
SD-WAN box. It could be any of those things, right?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks,
Okay.
Ryan.
Thanks
Have a
all.
great day.
Sounds good.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you,
Take care, guys.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.